President Trump vowing to fight all the subpoenas, starting with protecting one of his longest-serving and, frankly, most controversial aides, Stephen Mueller, who the White House is now ordering to resist a subpoena to testify under oath about the Trump administration's immigration policies. Mueller was, of course, behind the ousting of Homeland Security officials who advised Donald Trump that some of his immigration orders would not be lawful. The White House trying to block Trump's own lawyer, meanwhile, Don McGahn, from telling Congress probably what mostly he's already told Bob Mueller. So as you can see here, some of this stems from the high stakes of the fallout of the Mueller report and the evidence. It's only been out for 1 week, and it's about this fight, whether future testimony will build on a case against Donald Trump for obstruction and what that means for his president. That's definitely part of this. But keep in mind, a lot of the rest of this fight now is totally independent of Mueller. Democrats have been running the House for just about 3 months, and they're using their new powers to scrutinize an administration that has been riddled with ethics issues, which themselves drove record-breaking turnover among the staff and cabinet officials, and with other topics that are obviously overdue for congressional inspection after Trump largely got a pass when the GOP was running the House. So when you hear your president, Donald Trump, argue that government officials should defy Congress, it's not actually just red versus blue or Mueller related. It's also about whether your elected officials are able to hold the federal government accountable as envisioned in the Constitution. You know, these checks wouldn't work very well if cabinet officials refused to even talk with Congress or flouted every request to appear or every subpoena when it gets to that point. All of this recently arose in a fiery exchange between Chairwoman Waters and Trump Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, who, unlike his boss, wanted to try to emphasize that he said he wasn't openly flouting the obligation that he has to testify to Congress, although he did complain about some of it.
I have the gavel at this point. If you wish to leave, you may.
If you'd wish to keep me here so that I don't have my important meeting and continue to grill me, then we can do that. I will cancel my meeting and I will not be back here. You're instructing me to stay here and I should cancel.
No, you just made me an offer.
No, I didn't make you an offer.
You made me an offer that I accepted.
Please dismiss everybody. I believe you're supposed to take the gravel and bang it. That's
Please do not instruct me as to how I'm to conduct this committee.
Snap. I am joined by someone who I will not be instructing how to act in any which way, but who I welcome for her insights. Eleanor Clift, now with the Daily Beast. Former federal prosecutor John Flannery is also here. I'll get to you later. I don't have anything smart to say to you right now. Good. And Matt Miller, who was really at the nexus of these issues. We often think of him for the analysis you've given us on the Mueller probe, but as former official in the Obama Justice Department under Eric Holder, you also dealt with what the Congress can and can't ask for and how that's supposed to go in an orderly process. So
once or twice.
A little bit. So we have a great panel. Eleanor, when you look at that exchange there and you think about that was actually a higher bar from Mnuchin than the president is occupying right now in this town, because and that exchange, however fiery, Mnuchin was physically there and dealing with Congress. Now we have tonight the president saying we're going to defy it all.
I felt a little sorry for Secretary Mnuchin until I learned that the important official that he had kept waiting was the Interior Minister of Bangladesh. And that person should not take precedent over the Congress. And I think Maxine Waters felt disrespected. And I think now we have a clash between the two branches of government, and the Congress feels disrespected, and they feel that they're an equal branch of government. They're going to push this as hard as they can, and the president is going to push as hard as he can. So it gets, the referee will be the third branch of government, and the president seems to think he can just go to the Supreme Court and stop it all. That's not how it works. The subpoenas will be issued, they will be defied, then the Democrats will go to court, and the court will decide one way or the other, and this may well reach all the way up to the Supreme Court. The thing is, that takes a long time. I don't see Trump is a very weak legal case, especially with Don McGahn, he can't claim executive privilege. Don McGahn doesn't work for the government anymore. He's going to be worried about his own legacy, and I see he's the John Dean of this situation, and he really has the ability to make the Mueller report come alive and educate the American people as to what is really going on and what went on in that White House. So I don't think this is a legal fight the president can win. I think he's overestimating how he's packed the Supreme Court. He's done a pretty good job. But on this one, I think he loses, but it grinds the clock down, and that's what he is intending to do.
Matt, what portion of executive requests that the Obama administration received, to your knowledge, would they roughly, what portion would they accept and try to work on, and what would they fight? You did have some fights.
90, 95 you'd accept. I mean, what typically happens, look, no administration likes oversight. It's not an enjoyable process, but you are supposed to submit to it. So when you get a document request, usually it doesn't escalate to a subpoena. Subpoenas from Congress are usually very rare because most administrations, when you get a lawful document request, you send over the documents. When you get a request for testimony, you send witnesses up to testify. It's very rare that you get a subpoena. And then even when you get a subpoena, there's an accommodation process between the Congress and the administration where you work out what you're going to turn over. And I think what the Trump administration is doing is actually riskier than they suspect, in that the courts don't like to intercede in these fights. They want the two co-equal branches to work it out amongst themselves. And so the Trump administration, by just being so flagrant in denying everything, I think is risking the courts getting involved much earlier, much more quickly, and much stronger on the side of Congress than would otherwise happen if the Trump with the administration was at least showing a modicum of good faith. They're not doing that. They're stonewalling everything. That may have an impact in the courts.
Right, and that goes to how the courts review what the purpose is. The purpose, John, in a lot of the Mueller-related issues, which is why apparently the White House is afraid of what McGahn would say under oath, afraid he'll tell the truth, is that the president allegedly could have had corrupt intent. Exactly. And so I wonder if we're a week into the Mueller report, and so it's still just sinking in. I've mentioned on the show, it's the most purchased book on Amazon right now. The general public is actually still figuring out what this was. And so if we could speak plainly, I saw Judge Napolitano here on Fox News. I'm going to play this for the viewers. Talk about the fact that there is a real thing about how you don't just indict a sitting president. Some people disagree with it, but that's a real thing. You know what there isn't? There isn't a thing that the president doesn't commit crimes by being president. And so Napolitano was very stark, take a listen, in saying the evidence of criminal intent in the Mueller report shows that Donald Trump effectively did the things that provide the evidence for these crimes. Take a look.
When the president asked Corey Lewandowski, his former campaign manager, to get Mueller fired, that's obstruction of justice. When the president asked his then White House counsel to get Mueller fired and then lie about it, that's obstruction of justice. Ordering them to break federal law to save him from the consequences of his own behavior, that is immoral, that is criminal.
Strong statement, and I agree with it. Maybe everybody on this panel would. To look at what Nixon did, it's almost like Trump wants to emulate every strongman and past offender of good sense, good government, and his hero in this case is Richard Nixon. Article 3 of his impeachment was exactly obstructing requests from the Congress and withholding documents and information. And Matt knows this better than I do, but in the Fast and Furious litigation, there was a case by Judge Jackson who analyzed whether or not certain documents should be produced during the Obama administration about that. And one of the key elements of that was that Justice had produced so much public information, it was hard for them to say that they didn't need to produce it under certain variety of objections they made. And it's a complicated set of cases, but it goes on from there. By contrast, we have Trump in a position in which everything has been given to the special counsel. They waived attorney-client privilege. They waived executive privilege. They waived the Fifth Amendment privilege. It's out there in a report, and it defies imagination that they could go to any court and say, we shouldn't get this. This is an abuse of power, given what they've already seen. We already have the case made, and gentlemen like Judge Napolitano are making it again. So I think that when we get to the stage where we go to court, which appears to be inevitable, we should ask for expedited proceedings on their frivolous objections to producing the material. I also think that Congress should seek the alternative paths. For example, McGahn might appear himself, despite what the White House wants, and there are other witnesses who would. So I think you operate on parallel tracks, and you do something that didn't happen in the Starr investigation. You call real live witnesses like McGahn and some others, you know, Bannon and so forth, who are identified as telling us what was done to obstruct the investigation.
Well, and you wonder whether there is a Mueller effect here, because what comes through in the Mueller report was that if Donald Trump's aides carried out what he wanted, he might not be president right now. I mean, he owes a huge, huge thank you letter to some of the people that he's had the worst falling outs with, Priebus, McGahn, and Bannon, which tells you about those early days. And so if you want to call that the sort of the Mueller effect, the president eyeing his own criminal liability, does that explain why Stephen Miller is not being allowed to testify? Because my understanding and my conversations with Stephen Miller suggest he would be eager to go have a fight with Democratic members of Congress in a televised manner.
I think the Stephen Miller objection to having Stephen Miller testify has more to do with his policy positions. I don't think they're looking at Miller to add more fire and fury to what already appeared in the report. I think it's about policy. And so this president is
But why not go defend it? In other words, if Miller wants it, and Bannon and some of the other old guard would say, absolutely go have a debate on immigration in Congress.
Yeah, but he's going to be asked.
Who's holding him back?
But he's going to be asked about the policy-making procedures in the White House and more of the fact that this president has no impulse control, that he makes these decisions without consulting with anyone. I mean, that will come across. And I think that's going to disturb the American people as well, that there's no orderly, there is no system of government, really.
I can think of two reasons why you wouldn't want Stephen Miller to go testify if you're the White House. One, you don't want to set the precedent that if we send one witness up when you're trying to stonewall everything else, all of a sudden it looks pretty hard. It's pretty hard to give a reason why you're not sending other witnesses. The second is every time he appears on television, it is a public relations disaster for the White House.
Yes, you're
and I think they do make the point that White House aides actually don't usually testify.
But isn't that I'm going to push you on that. Isn't that eye of the beholder?
No.
In other words, isn't it that when he had a big fight with an anchor, say, on another network, on CNN, that some people walk away from that critical of Miller, and some people in the MAGA crowd say, great, of course he should take it to an anchor.
That's absolutely true, but you notice he's not on TV very often. You notice those appearances are very infrequent, and he's not the person you see sent out to the Sunday shows very often. It usually happens when there's a policy so debased that no one else will go out and defend it. That's when Stephen Miller shows up.
But there's the same weakness with him. The weakness is that he has been on talk shows. They've issued statements. The president himself has talked about all of these things. How could you go in court and say, we just don't want him to appear under oath and explain the current practices?
As you often do, John, you make great points. I have one more bit of housekeeping before we get on. I mentioned at the top of the show we have a lot in tonight's show. When I start off the show, as viewers may know, we often have the box. I'm not so good at math, but there, it's right here. Tonight's box refers to the fight over subpoenas, all the president's subpoenas, which, of course, for many eagle-eyed viewers, is a reference to All the President's Men. And we have the film version up, which means we have, do you see it, John? We have, take a look. We have the Robert Redford. Look over here. Look into the
Okay, look in that.
Look forward.
Okay,
we have the Robert Redford.
Yeah.
We didn't plan this. We started with our All the President's Subpoenas reference. Then someone pulled that photo, and then we thought, oh my God.
Yeah,
Looks good on you.
He was right about Nixon, and I would hope he'd do a movie and be right about Trump. But he's the actor. I do law.
But are you comfortable with him playing you?
I'm comfortable with a guy who looks like me, who's a real actor playing me. Yes, I am happy with that.
Living proof that there's such a thing as body doubles, right?
Yes, well, for years they thought I looked like a Kennedy, and I said all Irish look alike. But in recent years,
But before your head gets too big.
Well, there's no chance that's going to happen.
Eleanor Clift has cameoed as herself. Is that correct?
Oh, I have.
She's cameoed. Have you ever cameoed as yourself?
Well, a couple of times I've appeared in films, yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
All right.
Actually,
cases I had.
Playing oneself should be easy, but it's evidently the hardest thing in the world, because that's what presidential candidates have to master.
Well,
authenticity.
This is something, you're talking about something near and dear to my heart, because that's something that musicians and artists deal with as well, which is your authenticity is who you are, and you're sharing that with people.
Right.
But the more you share it on a repeat basis, the harder it is to maintain yourself.
Right. So you have to find some deep reservoir of pain that you have to touch upon, or you have to just write yourself a note, smile, have fun. This is just television.
I think you have to just,
right.
You can't overthink it. You know, I mean, my view is when we come here, there are things I might like to say if you didn't ask me about it. But my view is I listen to your question and I react to all of us talking. And that's just this side of what acting is.
Well, I have one more question for Matt Miller, and that is, what the hell are we talking about?
I don't know. I got lost. I started to feel unworthy. I don't have an actor you're comparing me to, and I've not played myself in a movie.
Right,
so
right. But he's perfectly at the juncture of legality and politics, or legal issues in politics.
Well, culture is not so courageous. I mean, it's years afterwards you see a movie like the one Redford was in. It was all settled by
as you
that
say,
time.
the hero worship comes later, and the actual way they shot the movie, it was Judge Sirica, it was law enforcement, and of course some of the reporters who were involved, the print reporters who were digging it up. On that note, a fitting note, we're going to fit in a break. My thanks to Eleanor Clift, appearing as herself, John Flannery, and Matt Miller. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.